Hey, Corel. Good to see you. Sorry, I was just grabbing my third thing to drink. Hope your week has been going all right. How's the weather been treating you over there? I'm going to switch over to this screen, so it looks like we're actually here. I really need to get new earbuds. I'm using these earbuds that I bought about 20 or so years ago. That might have been 23. Oh wow, that is cold. It's been very warm this past week. We're supposed to get a little more precipitation later this week. But yeah, it's been in like the 50s and 60s. People have been out walking in t-shirts. Really interesting. And the snowpack situation isn't looking too hot either. Ba-da-ching. That not intentional. That was a happy accident there. Yeah, we don't even have, I think, half of the snowpack that we usually do. And California is always in drought, it seems. So here's hoping that we'll get more precipitation in the coming months. Winter kind of arrives late here, which it was always weird to me watching like Christmas movies where they would have the snowy Christmas, and I think we've had like 2 or 3 snowy Christmases in my entire life. Here, of course, like I lived a couple other places and they had snowy Christmases. Alrighty, let's go find Snockings. Snockings. Hey. Sweetie butt. How are you? She will be most appreciative. Thank you, Corel. She was hanging out in the window. One of her favorite. Oh, she's purring already. You know what's coming. Hi. Snockings. Your treats are there. Hey, they're on the desk. Hi, Pants. Maestro's looking up like, do I get some? I'll give you one until there's a Oh no! Snockings dropped some. Luckily, Maestro was distracted by the one that I gave him. Sorry, had to adjust that. All right. Snockings, thanks you very much. Well, I hope that you have been keeping nice and warm. Have you been getting snow over there? Or is it more like a dry cold? Ah, okay. Probably like freezes at night, though. We've been getting a little rain here, not that much. It's funny, like I'll come home from work. This is on a completely different note. I'll come home from work and as soon as I come in the room, Maestro, who's been asleep on my bed all day, is like super excited, wants to nuzzle me, and then sits right down and eats, which he hasn't touched since the morning when I fed him. He just wants the company. Oh, yeah. Alrighty. I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our story time today. So there we go. Let me hide Maestro there. Chapter 3. Will Stutely rescued by his good companions. Now when the sheriff found that neither law nor guile could overcome Robin Hood, he was much perplexed, and said to himself, "Fool that I am, had I not told our king of Robin Hood, I would not have gotten myself into such a coil. But now I must either take him captive, or have wrath visited upon my head from his most gracious majesty. I've tried law, and I've tried guile, and I've failed in both. So I will try what may be done with might." Sorry, I'm just reading what you had said. Upper elevation. See small amounts of ground. Too warm. Oh, yeah. We get that here too, actually. We get very, it takes a while for it to stick, and then usually, if we just get a little bit, it'll turn into slush, and then it'll freeze overnight, and it makes it icy. So it's not like the big, beautiful, fluffy snow that you get in like Minnesota and places like that. So yeah, I get the ground too warm for it to stick. Thus communing within himself, he called his constables together and told him what was in his mind. "Now take ye each 4 men, all armed and proof," said he, "and get ye gone to the forest at different points, and lie in wait for this same Robin Hood. But if any constable finds too many men against him, let him sound a horn, and then let each band within hearing come with all speed and join the party that calls them. Thus, I think, shall we take this green-clad knave. Furthermore, to him that first meeteth with Robin Hood shall 100 pounds of silver money be given, if he be brought to me dead or alive. And to him that meeteth with any of his band shall 20 pounds be given, if such be brought to me dead or alive. So be ye bold, and be ye crafty." So thus they went in 3 companies of 5 to Sherwood Forest to take Robin Hood, each constable wishing that he might be the one to find the bold outlaw, or at least one of his band. For 7 days and nights they hunted through the forest glades, but never saw so much as a single man in Lincoln Green. For tidings of all this had been brought to Robin Hood by trusty Edom of the Blue Boar. When he first heard the news, Robin said, "If the sheriff dare send force to meet force, well will it be for him and many a better man besides, for blood will flow, and there will be a great trouble for all. But fain would I shun blood in battle, and fain would I not deal sorrow to womenfolk and wives, because good stout yeomen lose their lives. Once I slew a man, and never do I wish to slay a man again, for it is bitter for the soul to think thereon. So now we will abide silently in Sherwood Forest, so that it may be well for all. But should we be forced to defend ourselves, or any of our band, then let each man draw bow and brand with might and main." At this speech many of the band shook their heads and said to themselves, "Now the sheriff will think that we are cowards, and folk will scoff throughout the countryside, saying that we fear to meet those men." But they said nothing aloud, swallowing their words and doing as Robin bade them. Thus they hid in the depths of Sherwood Forest for 7 days and 7 nights, and never showed their faces abroad in all that time. But early in the morning of the 8th day Robin Hood called the band together and said, Now who will go and find what the sheriff's men are at by this time? For I know right well that we will not abide forever within Sherwood shades. At this a great shout arose, and each man waved his bow aloft and cried that he might be the one to go. Then Robin Hood's heart was proud when he looked around at his stout, brave fellows and said, "Brave and true are ye all, my merry men, and a right stout band of good fellows are ye. But ye cannot all go, so I will choose one from among you, and it shall be good Will Stutely, for he is as sly as e'er an old dog fox in Sherwood Forest." Then Will Stutely leaped high aloft and laughed loudly, clapping his hands for pure joy that he should have been chosen from amongst them all. "Now thanks, good master," quoth he, "and if I bring not news of those knaves to thee, call me no more thy sly Will Stutely." Then he clad himself in a friar's gown, and underneath the robe he hung a good broadsword in such a place that he could easily lay hands upon it. Thus clad, he set forth upon his quest until he came to the sheriff's men, yet he turned neither to the right nor to the left, but only drew his cowl the closer over his face, folding his hands as if in meditation. So at last he came to the sign of the Blue Boar, "For," quoth he to himself, "our good friend Edom will tell me all the news." At the sign of the Blue Boar he found a band of the sheriff's men drinking right lustily. So, without speaking to anyone, he sat down upon a distant bench, and his staff in his hand, and his head bowed forward as though he were meditating. Thus he sat waiting until he might see the landlord depart, and Edom did not know him, but thought him to be some poor tired friar, so he let him sit without saying a word to himself or molesting him, though he liked not the cloth. "For," said he to himself, It is a hard heart that kicks the lame dog from off the sill." As Stutely sat thus, there came a great house cat and rubbed against his knee, raising his robe a palm's breadth high. Stutely pushed his robe quickly down again, but the constable who commanded the sheriff's men saw what had passed, and saw also fair leaping green beneath the friar's robe. He said nothing at the time, but communed within himself in this wise. "Yon is no friar of orders grey, and also, I wot, no honest yeoman goeth about in priest's garb, nor doth a thief go so for naught. Now I think in good sooth that is one of Robin Hood's own men." So presently he said aloud, "O holy father, wilt thou not take a good pot of March beer to slake thy thirsty soul withal?" But Stutely shook his head silently, for he said to himself, "Maybe there be those here who know my voice." Then the constable said again, Whither goest thou, holy friar, upon this hot summer's day?" "I go to pilgrim to Canterbury town," answered Will Stutely, speaking gruffly so that none might know his voice. Then the constable said for the third time, "Now tell me, holy father, do pilgrims to Canterbury wear good Lincoln green beneath their robes?" "Ha! By my faith, I take thee to be some lusty thief, and perhaps one of Robin Hood's own band. Now, by Our Lady's grace, if thou movest hand or foot, I will run thee through the body with my sword." Then he flashed forth his bright sword and leaped upon Will Stutely, thinking he would take him unaware. But Stutely had his own sword tightly held in his hand beneath his robe, so he drew it forth before the constable came upon him. Then the stout constable struck a mighty blow, but he struck no more in all that fight, for Stutely, parrying the blow right deftly, smote the constable back again with all his might. Then he would have escaped, but could not, for the other, all dizzy with the wound and with the flowing blood, seized him by the knees with his arms even as he reeled and fell. Then the others rushed upon him, and Stutely struck again at another of the Robin's men. Oh, goodness. Then the others rushed upon him, and Stutely struck again at another of the sheriff's men. But the steel-clad glanced the blow, and though the blade... What's up, Maestro? And though the blade bit deep, it did not kill. Meanwhile, the constable, fainting as he was, drew Stuteley downward, and the other, seeing the yeoman hampered so, rushed upon him again, and one smote him a blow upon the crown, so that the blood ran down his face and blinded him. Then staggering he fell, and all sprang upon him, though he struggled so manfully that he could hardly hold himself, that they could hardly hold him fast. When they bound him with stout hempen cords, so that he could not move either hand or foot, and thus they overcame him. But it was a doleful day's doings for two of that band, for the constable was sorely wounded, and the other, that Stuteley smote upon the crown, lay sick for many days ere he was the stout man that he had been before this famous fight. Robin Hood stood under the greenwood tree, drinking of Will Stuteley, and how he might be faring, when suddenly he saw two of his stout yeomen come running down the forest path, and betwixt them ran buxom Mason of the Blue Boar, a Megan. Then Robin's heart fell, for he knew that they were the bearers of ill tidings. "Will Stuteley hath been taken," cried they, when they had come to where he stood. "And is it thou that hast brought us such doleful news?" said Robin to the lass. "Ay, Mary, for I saw it all," cried she, panting as the hare pants when it has escaped the hounds. "And I fear he is wounded sore, for one smote him main shrewdly in the crown. They have bound him, taken him to Nottingham Tower, and ere I left the Blue Boar I heard that he should be hanged tomorrow day." "He shall not be hanged tomorrow day," cried Robin, "or if he be, fully many a one shall gnaw the sod, and many shall have cause to cry alack-a-day." Then he clapped his horn to his lips and blew 3 blasts right loudly, and presently his good yeoman came running through the greenwood until 70 bold blades were gathered around him. "Now hark you all," cried Robin, "our dear companion Will Stuteley hath been taken by that vile sheriff's men. Therefore doth it behoove us to take bow and brand in hand to bring him off again. For I wot that we ought to risk life and limb for him, as he hath risked life and limb for us. Is it not so, my merry men all?" Then all cried "Aye" with a great voice. Hang on a second. What's up, kiddies? Are you going to interrupt me, or are you going to be nice and calm? Hi, Snockies. Hi, Maestro. Yeah, if you want in my lap, come and get in my lap. But don't pick at my shoulder. Make up your mind. I don't know, maybe she's not. "Now," quoth Robin again, "if there be any here that care not to risk life and limb, let them bide within Sherwood shades, for I could strain no man to my will, but tomorrow I will bring Will Stuteley back, or I will die with him." Then up spake stout Little John. "Thinkest thou, good master," he said, "that there be one among us all that would not risk life and limb for a fellow in trouble? If such there be, then do not I know every man in this company of stout yeomen, and moreover, if there be such, I wot he should be stripped and beaten from out our merry woodlands. Is it not so, good friends?" Then all cried "Aye" again, for there was not one among them all that would not venture everything for a friend in need. So the next day they all wended their way from Sherwood Forest, but by different paths, for it behooved them to be very crafty. So the band separated into parties of 2s and 3s, which were all to meet again in a tangled dell that lay near to Nottingham town. Then, when they all gathered together at the place of meeting, Robin spoke to them thus. "Now we will lie here in ambush until we can get news, for it doth behoove us to be cunning and wary if we would bring our friend Will Stuteley off from the sheriff's clutches." So they lay hidden a long time, until the sun stood high in the sky. The day was warm, and the dusty road was bare of travellers, except an aged palmer, who walked slowly along the high road that led close behind the grey castle wall of Nottingham town. When Robin saw that no other wayfarer was in sight, he called young David of Doncaster, who was a shrewd man for his years, and said to him, "Now get thee forth, young David, and speak to yonder palmer that walks beside the town wall, for he hath come but now from Nottingham town, and may tell thee news of good Stuteley perchance." So David strode forth, and when he came up to the pilgrim, he saluted him and said, "Good morrow, holy father, and canst thou tell me when Will Stuteley will be hanged upon the gallows tree? I fain would not miss the sight, for I have come from afar to see so study of rogue hanged." "Now out upon thee, young man," cried the palmer, "that thou wouldst speak so when a good stout man is to be hanged for nothing but guarding his own life." And he struck his staff upon the ground in anger. "Alas, say I, that this thing should be, for even this day, toward the evening when the sun falleth low, he shall be hanged 80 rods from the great town gate of Nottingham, where 3 roads meet, for there the sheriff sweareth he shall die as a warning to all outlaws in Nottinghamshire. But yet I say again, alas, for though Robin Hood and his band may be outlaws, hath he taken only from the rich and the strong and the dishonest man, where there is not a poor widow nor a peasant with many children, nigh to Sherwood, but he has barley flour enough all the year long through him. It grieves my heart to see one as gallant as this Stuteley die, for I have been a good Saxon yeoman in my day, ere I turned palmer, and now I know a stout hand and one that smiteth shrewdly at a cruel Norman or a proud abbot with fat money bags. Had good Stuteley's master but known how his man was compassed about with perils, perchance he might send succour to bring him out of the hand of his enemies." "Ay, marry, that is true," cried the young man. "If Robin and his men be nigh this place, I wot right well they will strive to bring him forth from his peril. But fare thee well, thou good old man, and believe me, if Will Stuteley die, he shall be right well avenged." Then he turned and strode rapidly away, but the palmer looked after him, muttering, "I wot that youth is no country hind that hath come to see a good man die. Well, well, perchance Robin Hood is not so far away, but that there will be stout doings this day." So he went upon his way, muttering to himself. When David of Doncaster told Robin Hood what the palmer had said to him, Robin called the band around him and spoke to them thus: "Now let us get straightway into Nottingham town and mix ourselves with the people there, but keep ye one another in sight, pressing as near the prisoner and his guards as ye can. When they come outside the walls, strike no man without need, for I would swain avoid bloodshed. But if ye do strike, strike hard, and see that there be no need to strike again. Then keep all together until we come again to Sherwood, and let no man leave his fellows." The sun was low in the western sky when a bugle note sounded from the castle walls. Then all was bustle in Nottingham town, and crowds filled the streets, for all knew that the famous Will Stuteley was to be hanged that day. Presently the castle gates opened wide, and a great array of men-at-arms came forth with noise and clatter, the sheriff, all clad in shining mail of linked chain, riding at their head. In the midst of all the guard and cart, with a halter about his neck, rode Will Stuteley. His face was pale with his wound and with loss of blood, like the moon in broad daylight, and his fair hair was clotted in points upon his forehead where the blood had hardened. When he came forth from the castle, he looked up and he looked down, but though he saw some faces that showed pity and some that showed friendliness, he saw none that he knew. Then his heart sank within him like a plummet of lead, but nevertheless he spoke up boldly. Give a sword into my hand, Sir Sheriff, said he, and wounded man though I be, I will fight thee and all thy men till life and strength be gone. Nay, thou naughty varlet, quoth the sheriff, turning his head and looking right grimly upon Will Stutely. Thou shalt have no sword, but shalt die a mean death, as beseemeth a vile thief like thee. Then do but untie my hands, and I will fight thee and thy men with no weapon, but only my naked fists. I crave no weapon, but let me not be meanly hanged this day. Then the sheriff laughed aloud. Why, how now, quoth he, is thy proud stomach quailing? Strive thyself, thou vile knave, for I mean that thou shalt hang this day, and that there where 3 roads meet, so that all men shall see thee hang, for carrion crows and daws to peck at. O thou dastard heart, cried Will Stutely, gnashing his teeth at the sheriff, thou coward hind! If ever my good master meet thee, thou shalt pay dearly for this day's work. He doth scorn thee, and so do all brave hearts. Knowest thou not that thou and thy name are jests upon the lips of every brave yeoman? Such a one as thou art, thou wretched craven, will never be able to subdue bold Robin Hood. Ha! Cried the sheriff in a rage. Is it even so? Am I a jest with thy master, as thou callest him? Now I will make a jest of thee, and a sorry jest withal, for I will quarter thy limbs for I will quarter thee limb from limb, after thou art hanged. Then he spurred his horse forward, and said no more to Stutely. At last they came to the great town gate, through which Stutely saw the fair country beyond, with hills and dales all clothed in verdure, and far away the dusky line of Sherwood's skirts. Then when he saw the slanting sunlight lying in field and fallow, shining redly here and there on clot and farmhouse, and when he heard the sweet birds singing their vespers and the sheep bleating upon the hillside, and beheld the sallows flying in the bright air, there came a great fullness to his heart, so that all things blurred to his sight through salt tears, and he bowed his head lest the folk should think him unmanly when they saw the tears in his eyes. Thus he kept his head bowed till they had passed through the gate and were outside the walls of the town. But when he looked up again, he felt his heart leap within him and then stand still for pure joy, for he saw the face of one of his own dear companions of merry Sherwood. Then glancing quickly round, he saw well-known faces upon all sides of him, crowding closely upon the men-at-arms who were guarding him. Then of a sudden the blood sprang to his cheeks, for he knew for a moment his own good master in the press, and, seeing him, knew that Robin Hood and all his band were there. Yet betwixt him and them was a line of men-at-arms. "Now stand back!" cried the sheriff in a mighty voice, for the crowd pressed around on all sides. "What mean ye, varlets, that ye push upon us so? Stand back, I say!" Then came a bustle and a noise, and one strove to push between the men-at-arms so as to reach the cart, and Stutely saw that it was Little John that made all that stir. "Now stand back!" cried one of the men-at-arms, whom Little John pushed with his elbows. "Now stand thou back thine own self," quoth Little John, and straightway smote the man a buffet beside his head that felled him as a butcher fells an ox. And then he leaped to the cart where Stutely sat. "Pray thee take leave of thy friends ere thou diest, Will," quoth he. "Or maybe I shall die with thee if thou must die, for I could never have better company." Then with one stroke he cut the bonds that bound the other man's arms and legs, and Stutely leaped straight away from the cart. "Now as I live," cried the sheriff, yon varlet I know right well is a sturdy rebel. Take him, I bid you all, and let him not go." So saying, he spurred his horse upon Little John, and rising in his stirrups, smote with might and main. But Little John ducked quickly underneath the horse's belly, and the blow whistled harmlessly over his head. "Nay, good Sir Sheriff," cried he, leaping up again when the blow had passed, "I must e'en borrow thy most worshipful sword." Thereupon he twitched the weapon deftly out from the sheriff's hand. "Here, Stutely," he cried, "the sheriff hath lent thee his sword. Back to back with me, man, and defend thyself, for help is nigh." Help is it nigh? Okay, it looked like a T. Sorry. For help is nigh. "Down with them!" bellowed the sheriff in a voice like an angry bull, and he spurred his horse upon the two who now stood back to back, forgetting in his rage that he had no weapon with which to defend himself. "Stand back, Sheriff!" cried Little John, and even as he spoke, a bugle horn sounded shrilly, and a cloth-yard shaft whistled within an inch of the sheriff's head. Then came a swaying hither and thither, and oaths, cries, and groans, and clashing of steel and swords flashed in the setting sun, and a score of arrows whistled through the air. And some cried, "Help! Help!" and some, "A rescue! A rescue!" "Treason!" cried the sheriff in a loud voice. Bear back, else we be all dead men." Thereupon he reined his horse backwards through the thickest of the crowd. Now Robin Hood and his band might have slain half of the Sherwood's men had they desired to do so, but they let them push out of the press and get them gone, only sending a bunch of arrows after them to hurry them in their flight. "Oh, stay!" shouted Will Stutely after the sheriff. "Thou wilt never catch bold Robin Hood if thou dost not stand to meet him face to face." But the sheriff, bowing along his horse's back, made no answer, but only spurred the faster. Then Will Stutely turned to Little John and looked him in the face till the tears ran down from his eyes, and he wept aloud, and kissing his friend's cheeks, "O Little John," he quoth, "mine own true friend, and he that I love better than man or woman in all the world beside. Little did I reckon to see thy face this day, or to meet thee this side paradise." Little John could make no answer, but wept also. Then Robin Hood gathered his band together in a close rank, with Will Stutely in the midst, and thus they moved slowly away toward Sherwood, and were gone as a storm cloud moves away from the spot where a tempest has swept the land. But they left 10 of the sheriff's men lying along the ground wounded, some more, some less, yet no one knew who smote them down. Thus the sheriff of Nottingham tried thrice to take Robin Hood, and failed each time, and the last time he was frightened, for he felt how near he had come to losing his life. So he said, "These men fear nothing God nor man, nor king or king's officers. I would sooner lose my office than my life, so I will trouble them no more." So he kept close within his castle for many a day, and dared not show his face outside his own household. And all the time he was gloomy, and would speak to no one, for he was ashamed of what had happened that day. Part second, in which shall be told how Robin Hood turned butcher, and how he revenged himself upon the sheriff. Also of the famous adventures that befell Little John at the Nottingham archery match, and how he entered the sheriff's service. Chapter 1. Robin Hood turns butcher. Now after all these things had happened, and it became known to Robin Hood how the sheriff had tried 3 times to make him captive, he said to himself, "If I have the chance, I will make our worshipful sheriff pay right well for that which he hath done to me. Maybe I shall bring him some time into Sherwood Forest, and have him to a right time. Hang on. Maybe I may bring him sometime to Sherwood Forest and have him to a right merry feast with us. For when Robin Hood caught a baron or a squire, or a fat abbot or bishop, he brought them to the greenwood tree and feasted them before he lighted their purses. But in the meantime, Robin Hood and his band lived quietly in Sherwood Forest without showing their faces abroad, for Robin knew that it would not be wise for him to be seen in the neighborhood of Nottingham, those in authority being very wroth with him. But though they did not go abroad, they lived a merry life within the woods, spending the days in shooting at garlands hung upon a willow wand at the end of the glade, the leafy aisles ringing with merry jests and laughter. For whoever missed the garland was given a good buffet, which, if delivered by Little John, never failed to topple over the unfortunate yeoman. Then they had bouts of wrestle and of cudgel play, so that every day they gained in skill and strength. Thus they dwelled for nearly a year, and in that time Robin Hood often turned over in his mind many means of making an even score with the sheriff. At last he began to fret at his confinement, so one day he took up his stout cudgel and set forth to seek adventure, strolling blithely along until he came to the edge of Sherwood. There, as he rambled along the sunlit road, he met a lusty young butcher driving a fine mare and riding in a stout new cart, all hung about with meat. Merrily whistled the butcher as he jogged along, for he was going to the market, and the day was fresh and sweet, making his heart blithe within him. "Good morrow to thee, jolly fellow," quoth Robin. "Thou seemest happy this merry morn." "Ay, that am I," quoth the jolly butcher, "and why should I not be so? Am I not hale in wind and limb? Have I not the bonniest lass in all Nottinghamshire? And lastly, am I not to be married to her on Thursday next in sweet Locksley Town?" "Ha!" said Robin, "comest thou from Locksley Town? Well, do I know that fair place for miles about, and well do I know each hedgerow and gentle pebbly stream, and even all the bright little fishes therein, for there I was born and bred. Now, where goest thou with thy meat, my fair friend?" "I go to the market at Nottingham Town, to see my beef and my mutton, to sell my beef and my mutton," answered the butcher. "But who art thou that comest from Locksley Town?" "Well, a yeoman am I, and men do call me Robin Hood." "Now, by Our Lady's grace," cried the butcher, "well do I know thy name, and many a time have I heard thy deeds both sung and spoken of. But heaven forbid that thou shouldst take aught of me. An honest man am I, and have wronged neither man nor maid, so trouble me not, good master, as I have never troubled thee." "Nay, heaven forbid indeed," quoth Robin, "that I should take from such as thee, jolly fellow. Not so much as 1 farthing would I take from thee, for I love a fair Saxon face like thine right well, especially when it cometh from Locksley Town, and most especially when the man that owneth it is to marry a bonny lass on Thursday next. But come, tell me what price thou wilt sell me all of thy meat and thy horse and cart." "4 marks do I value meat, cart, and mare," quoth the butcher. "But if I do not sell all my meat, I will not have 4 marks in value." Then Robin Hood plucked the purse from his girdle, and quoth he, Here in this purse are 6 marks. Now I would fain be a butcher for the day and sell my meat in Nottingham Town. Wilt thou close a bargain with me, and take 6 marks for thine outfit?" "And may the blessings of all the saints fall on thine honest head," cried the butcher right joyfully, as he leaped down from his cart and took the purse that Robin held out to him. "Nay," quoth Robin, laughing loudly, "many do like me and wish me well, but few call me honest. Now, get thee gone back to thy lass, and give her a sweet kiss for me." So saying, he donned the butcher's apron, and, climbing into the cart, he took the reins in his hand and drove off through the forest to Nottingham Town. When he came to Nottingham, He entered that part of the market where butchers stood and took up his inn, or the stand for dwelling, in the best place he could find. Next he opened his stall and spread his meat upon the bench. Then, taking his cleaver and steel and clattering them together, he trod aloud in merry tones. Now come, ye lasses, and eke thy dames, and buy your meat from me. For the pennyworths of meat I sell for the charge of 1 penny. Lamb have I that hath fed upon naught but the dainty dame's pied, and the violet sweet and the daffodil that grows fair streams beside. And beef have I from the healthy worlds, and mutton from dales all green, and veal as white as a maiden's brow with its mother's milk I ween. Then come, ye lasses, and eke, ye dames, come, buy your meat from me, for the pennyworths of meat I sell for the charge of 1 penny. Then he sang blithely, while all who stood near listened amazedly. Then, when he had finished, he clattered the steel and cleaver still more loudly, shouting lustily, Now, who'll buy? Who'll buy? 4 fixed prices have I. 3 pennies worth of meat shall I sell to a fat friar or priest for 6pence, for I want not their custom. Stout aldermen I charge 3pence, for it doth not matter to me whether they buy or not. To buxom dames I sell 3 pennies worth of meat for 1 penny, for I like their custom well, but to the bonny lass that hath a liking for a good tight butcher, I charge not but 1 fair kiss, for I like her custom the best of all. Then all began to stare and wonder and crowd around, laughing, for never was such selling heard of in all Nottingham town. But when they came to buy, they found it as he had said, for he gave goodwife or dame as much meat for 1 penny as they could buy elsewhere for 3, and when a widow or a poor woman came to him, he gave her flesh for nothing. But when a married lass came and gave him a kiss, he charged not 1 penny for his meat. And many such came to his stall, for his eyes were as blue as the skies of June, and he laughed merrily, giving to each full measure. Thus he sold his meat so fast that no butcher that stood near him could sell anything. Then they began to talk among themselves, and some said, This must be some thief who has stolen cart, horse, and meat. But others said, Nay, when did ye ever see a thief who parted with his goods so freely and merrily? This must be some prodigal who hath sold his father's land and would fain live merrily while the money lasts. And these latter, being the greater number, the others came round one by one to their way of thinking. Then some of the butchers came to him to make his acquaintance. Come, brother, quoth one who was the head of them all, we be all of one trade, so wilt thou go dine with us? This day the sheriff hath asked all the Butchers' Guild to feast with him at the guild hall. There will be stout fare and much to drink, and that thou likest, or I much mistake thee. Now beshrew his heart, quoth jolly Robin, that would deny a butcher. And moreover, I will go dine with you all, my sweet lads, and that as fast as I can hie. Whereupon, having sold all his meat, he closed his stall and went with them to the great guild. When the sheriff had already come in state, and with him many butchers, when Robin and those that were with him came in, all laughing at some merry jest he had been telling them, those that were near the sheriff whispered to him, Yon is in right mad blade, for he hath sold more meat for 1 penny this day than we could sell for 3, and to whatsoever merry lass gave him a kiss, he gave meat for naught. And others said, He is some prodigal that hath sold his land for silver and gold, and meaneth to spend all right merrily. Then the sheriff called Robin to him, not knowing him in his butcher's dress, and bade him sit close to him on his right side, for he loved a rich young prodigal, especially when he thought that he might lighten that prodigal's pockets into his own most worshipful purse. So he made much of Robin, and laughed and talked with him more than any of the others. At last the dinner was ready to be served, and the sheriff bade Robin say grace. So Robin stood up and said, "Now heaven bless us all, and eat good meat and good sack within this house, and may all butchers be and remain as honest men as I am." At this all laughed, the sheriff loudest of all, for he said to himself, "Surely this is indeed some prodigal, and perchance I may empty his purse of some of the money that the fool throweth about so freely." Then he spake aloud to Robin, saying, "Thou art a jolly young blade, and I love thee mightily." And he smote Robin upon his shoulder. Then Robin laughed loudly too. "Yes," quoth he, "I know thou dost love a jolly blade, for didst thou not have jolly Robin Hood at thy shooting match, and didst thou not gladly give him a bright golden arrow for his own?" At this the sheriff looked grave, and all of the guild of butchers too, so that none laughed but Robin, only some winked slyly at each other. "Come, fill us some sack," cried Robin. "Let us e'er be merry while we may, for man is but dust, and he hath but a span to live here till the worm getteth him, as our good worship as our good gossip Swanthold saith. So let life be merry while it lasts, say I. Ne'er look down at the mouth, Sir Sheriff. Thou knowest but that thou mayest catch Robin Hood yet, if thou drinkest less good sack and malmsey, and bringest down the fat about thy paunch, and the dust from out thy brain. Be merry, man." Then the sheriff laughed again, but not as though he liked the jest, while the butchers said one to another, "Before heaven, never have we seen such a mad rollicking blade. Mayhaps, though, he will make the sheriff mad." "How now, brothers," cried Robin, "be merry, nay, ne'er count o'er your farthings, for by this and by that I shall pay this shot myself, even though it cost 200 pounds, so that no man draw up his lip, nor thrust his forefinger into his purse, for I swear that neither butcher nor sheriff shall pay 1 penny for this feast." "Now thou art a right merry soul," quoth the sheriff, "and I wot thou must have many a head of horned beasts, and many an acre of land, that thou dost spend thy money so freely." "Aye, that have I," quoth Robin, laughing loudly again. 500 more horned beasts have I and my brothers, and none of them have we been able to sell, else I might not have turned butcher. As for my land, I've never asked my steward how many acres I have." At this the sheriff's eye twinkled, and he chuckled to himself. "Nay, good youth," quoth he, "thou canst not sell thy cattle. It may be I will find a man that will lift them from thy hands. Perhaps that man may be myself, for I love a merry youth, and would help such a one along the path of life. Now, how much dost thou want for thy horned cattle?" "Well," quoth Robin, "they are worth at least 500 pounds. "Nay," answered the sheriff slowly, as if he were thinking within himself, "well do I love thee, and fain would I help thee long, but 500 pounds in money is a good round sum. Besides, I have it not by me, yet I would give thee 300 pounds for them all, and that in good hard silver and gold." "Now, thou old miser," quoth Robin, "while thou knowest that so many horned cattle are worth 700 pounds and more, and even that is but small for them, and yet thou, with thy grey hairs and 1 foot in the grave, wouldst trade upon the folly of a wild youth." At this the sheriff looked grimly at Robin. "Nay," quoth Robin, "look not on me as though thou hadst sour beer in thy mouth, man. I will take thine offer, but I and my brothers do need the money. We lead a merry life, and no one leads a merry life for a farthing, so I will close the bargain with thee. But mind that thou bringest a good 300 pounds with thee, for I trust not one that driveth so shrewd a bargain. I will bring thee the money, said the sheriff, but what is thy name, good youth? Men call me Robert o' Locksley, quoth bold Robin. Then, good Robert o' Locksley, quoth the sheriff, I will come this day to see thy horned beasts, but first my clerk shall draw up a paper, in which thou shalt be bound to the sale, for thou gettest not my money without I get thy beasts in return. Then Robin laughed again. So be it, said he, smiting his palm against the sheriff's hand. Truly my brothers will be thankful to get to thee for thy money. Thus the bargain was closed, but many of the butchers talked amongst themselves that the sheriff, saying that it was but a scurvy trick to beguile a poor spendthrift youth in this way. The afternoon had come when the sheriff mounted his horse and joined Robin Hood. He stood outside the gateway of the paved court waiting for him, for he had sold his horse and cart to a trader for 2 marks. Then they set forth upon their way, and the sheriff riding upon his horse, and Robin running beside him. Thus they left Nottingham town, and travelled forward along the dusty highway, laughing and jesting together, as though they had been good old friends. But all the time the sheriff said within himself, Thy jest to me of Robin Hood shall cost thee dear, good fellow, even 400 pounds, thou fool. For he thought he could make at least that much by this bargain. So they journeyed onward till they came within the verge of Sherwood Forest. Then presently the sheriff looked up and down, and to the right and to the left of him, and then grew quiet and ceased his laughter. Now, quoth he, may heaven and its saints preserve us this day from a rogue man called Robin Hood. Then Robin laughed aloud. Nay, said he, thou mayst see thy mind at rest, for well do I know Robin Hood, and well do I know that thou art in no danger from him this day than thou art from me. At this the sheriff looked askance at Robin, saying to himself, I like not that thou seemest so well acquainted with this bold outlaw, and I wish that I were well out of Sherwood Forest. But still they travelled deeper into the forest shades, and the deeper they went, the more quiet grew the sheriff. At last they came to where the road took a sudden bend, and before them a herd of dun deer went tripping across the path. Then Robin Hood came close to the sheriff, and pointing his finger, he said, These are my horned beasts, good Master Sheriff. How dost thou like them? Are they not fat and fair to see? At this the sheriff drew rein quickly. Now, fellow, quoth he, I would I were well out of this forest, for I like not thy company. Go thou thine own path, good friend, and let me go, and let me but go mine. But Robin only laughed and caught the sheriff's bridle arm. Nay, cried he, stay a while, for I would thou should see my brothers, who own these fair-horned beasts with me. So saying, he clapped his bugle to his mouth and winded 3 merry notes, and presently up the path came leaping 50 good stout yeomen, with Little John at their head. What wouldst thou have, good master? Quoth Little John. Why, answered Robin, dost thou not see that I have brought goodly company to feast with us today? Fie for shame! Do you not see our good and worshipful master, the Sheriff of Nottingham? Take thou his bridle, Little John, for he has honoured us today by coming to feast with us. Then all doffed their hats humbly, without smiling or seeming to be in jest, while Little John took the bridle rein and led the palfrey still deeper into the forest, all marching in order, with Robin Hood walking beside the sheriff, hat in hand. All this time the sheriff said never a word, but only looked about him like one suddenly awakened from sleep. But when he found himself going within the very depths of Sherwood, his heart sank within him, for he thought, "Surely my 300 pounds will be taken from me, even if they take not my life itself, for I have plotted against their lives more than once." But all seemed humble and meek, and not a word was said of danger, either of life or money. So at last they came to that part of Sherwood Forest where a noble oak spread its branches wide, and beneath it was a seat all made of moss, on which Robin sat down, placing the sheriff at his right hand. "Now busk ye, my merry men all," quoth he, "and bring forth the best we have, both of meat and wine, for his worship the sheriff hath feasted me in Nottingham Guildhall today, and I would not have him go back empty." All this time nothing had been said of the sheriff's money, so presently he began to pluck up heart. "For," said he to himself, "maybe Robin Hood hath forgotten all about it." Then, while beyond in the forest bright fires crackled and savory smells of sweetly roasting venison and fat capons filled the glade, and brown pasties warmed beside the blaze, did Robin Hood entertain the sheriff right royally. First, several couples stood forth at quarterstaff, and so shrewd were they at the game, and so quickly did they give stroke and parry, that the sheriff, who loved to watch all lusty sport of the kind, clapped his hands, forgetting where he was, and crying aloud, well struck, thou fellow with the black beard," little knowing that the man he called upon was the tinker that tried to serve his warrant upon Robin Hood. Then the best archers of the band set up a fair garland of flowers at 80 paces distance, and shot at it with the cunningest archery practice. But the sheriff grew grave, for he did not like this so well, the famous meeting of the butts in Nottingham town being still green in his memory, and the golden arrow that had been won there hanging close behind him. Then, when Robin saw what was in the sheriff's mind, he stopped the sport and called forth some of his band, who sang merry ballads, while others made their music upon the harp. When this was done, several yeomen came forward and spread cloths upon the green grass, and placed a royal feast, while others still broached barrels of sack and malmsey and good stout ale, and set them in jars upon the cloth with drinking horns about them. Then all sat down and feasted and drank merrily together until the sun was low and the half-moon glimmered with a pale light betwixt the leaves of the trees overhead. Then the sheriff arose and said, "I thank you all, good yeomen, for the merry entertainment ye have given me this day. Right courteously have ye used me, showing therein that ye have much respect for our glorious king and his deputy in brave Nottinghamshire. But the shadows grow long, and I must away before darkness comes, lest I lose myself within the forest." Then Robin Hood and all his merry men also arose, and Robin said to the sheriff, "If thou must go, worshipful sir, go thou must, but thou hast forgotten one thing." "Nay, I forgot not," said the sheriff, yet all the same his heart sank within him. "But I say that thou hast forgot something," quoth Robin. "We kept a merry inn here in the greenwood, but whoever becometh our guest must pay his reckoning." Then the sheriff laughed, but the laugh was hollow. "Well, jolly boys," quoth he, "we have had a merry time together today, and even if ye had not asked me, I would have given you 100 pounds for the sweet entertainment I have had." "Nay," quoth Robin seriously, "it would ill beseem us to treat your worship so meanly. By my faith, sir sheriff, I would be ashamed to show my face if I did not reckon the king's deputy at 300 pounds. Is it not so, my merry men all?" Then I, cried all in a loud voice. 300 devils, roared the sheriff. Think ye that your beggarly feast was worth £3, let alone 300? Nay, quoth Robin gravely, speak not so roundly, your worship. I do love thee for the sweet feast thou hast given me in this day in merry Nottingham town. But there be those here who love thee not so much. If thou wilt look down the cloth, thou wilt see Will Stutely, in whose eyes thou hast no great favour. Then 2 other stout fellows are there here that thou knowest not, that were wounded in a brawl nigh Nottingham town some time ago. Thou wottest the when. One of them was sore hurt in one arm, yet he hath got the use of it again. Good sheriff, be advised by me, pay thy score without more ado, or maybe it may fare ill with thee. As he spoke, the sheriff's ruddy cheeks grew pale, and he said nothing more, but looked upon the ground and gnawed his nether lip. Then slowly he drew forth his fat purse and threw it upon the cloth in front of him. Now take the purse, Little John, quoth Robin Hood, and see that the reckoning be right. We would not doubt our sheriff, but he might not like it if he should find he had not paid his full score. Then Little John counted the money and found that the bag held £300 in silver and gold. But to the sheriff it seemed as if every clink of the bright money was a drop of blood from his veins. And when he saw it all counted out in a heap of silver and gold, filling the wooden platter, he turned away and silently mounted his horse. Never have we had so worshipful a guest before, quoth Robin, and as the day waxeth late, I will send one of my young men to guide thee out of the forest depths. Nay, heaven forbid, cried the sheriff hastily. I can find mine own way, good man, without aid. Then I shall put thee on the right track mine own self, quoth Robin, and taking the sheriff's horse by the bridle rein, he led him into the main forest path. Then, before he let him go, he said, Now fare thee well, good sheriff, and when next thou thinkest to despoil some poor prodigal, remember thy feast in Sherwood Forest. Ne'er buy a horse, good friend, without first looking into its mouth, as our good gaffer Swathold says. Swanthold. And so, once more, fare thee well. Then he clapped his hand to the horse's back, and off went nag and sheriff through the forest glades. Then bitterly the sheriff rued the day that first he meddled with Robin Hood, for all men laughed at him, and many ballads were sung by folks throughout the country, of how the sheriff went to shear and came home shorn to the very quick. But thus men sometimes overreach themselves through greed and guile. Part 2. Little John goes to the fair in Nottingham town. Now we will tell of the merry adventure that befell Little John at the shooting match at Nottingham, and how he overcame Eric Lincoln in the famous bout at quarterstaff in that town. Also, how he entered the sheriff's service, and of his merry encounter with the sheriff's cook. So listen to what follows. Spring had gone since the sheriff's feast in Sherwood, and summer also, and the mellow month of October had come. All the air was cool and fresh, the harvests were gathered home, the young birds were full-fledged, the hops were plucked, and apples were ripe. But though time had so smoothed things over that men no longer talked of the horned beasts that the sheriff wished to buy, he was still sore about the matter, and could not bear to hear Robin Hood's name spoken in his presence. With October had come the time for holding the great fair, which was celebrated every 5 years at Nottingham town, to which folk came from far and near throughout the country. At such times archery was always the main sport of the day, for the Nottinghamshire yeomen were the best hand at the longbow in all merry England, But this year the sheriff hesitated a long time before he issued proclamations of the fair, fearing lest Robin Hood and his band might come to it. At first he had a great part of a mind not to proclaim the fair, but second thought told him that men would laugh at him and say among themselves that he was afraid of Robin Hood. So he put that thought by. At last he fixed in his mind that he would offer such a prize as they would not care to shoot for. At such times it had been the custom to offer a half-score of marks, or a ton of ale. So this year he proclaimed that a prize of 2 fat steers should be given to the best bowman. When Robin Hood heard what he had proclaimed, he was vexed, and said, "Now beshrew this sheriff that he should offer such a prize, but none but shepherds' hinds will care to shoot for it. I would have loved nothing better than to have had I would have loved nothing better than to have had another bout at merry Nottingham town. But if I should win this prize, naught would it pleasure or profit me." Then up spoke Little John. "Nay, but hearken, good master," said he. "Only to-day Will Stutely, young David of Doncaster, and I were at the sign of the Blue Boar, and there we heard all the news of this merry fair, and also that the sheriff hath offered this prize, that we of Sherwood might not care to come to the fair. So, good master, if thou wilt, I would fain to go and strive to win even this poor thing among the stout yeomen who will shoot at Nottingham town." "Nay, Little John," quoth Robin, "thou art a sound stout fellow, if thou lackest the cunning that good Stutely hath, and I would not have harm befall thee for all of Nottinghamshire. Nevertheless, if you wilt go, take some disguise, lest there be those there who might know thee." "So be it, good master," quoth Little John. "Yet all the disguise that I wish is this good suit of scarlet instead of this of Lincoln green. I will draw the coil of my jacket about my head, so that it will hide my brown hair and beard, and then I trust no one will know me." "It is much against my will," said Robin Hood. "Nevertheless, if thou dost wish it, get thee gone, but bear thyself seemingly, Little John, for thou art mine own right-hand man, and I could ill bear to have harm befall thee." So Little John clad himself all in scarlet and started off to the fair at Nottingham town. Right merry were these fair days at Nottingham, when the green before the great town gate was dotted with booths standing in rows, with tents of many-colored canvas, hung about with streamers and garlands of flowers, and the folk came from all the countryside, both gentle and common. In some booths there was dancing to merry music, in others flowed ale and beer, and in others, yet again, sweet cakes and barley sugar were sold, and sport was sport was going outside the booths also, where some minstrel sang ballads of the olden times, playing a second upon the harp, or with the wrestlers struggling with each other within the sawdust ring. But the people gathered most of all around the raised platform where stout fellows played at quarterstaff. So Little John came to the fair. All scarlet were his hose and jerkin, and scarlet were his cowled cap, with a scarlet feather stuck in the side of it. Over his shoulders were slung a stout bow of yew, and across his back hung a quiver of good round arrows. Many turned to look after such a stout, tall fellow, for his shoulders were broader by a palm's breadth than any that were there, and he stood a head taller than all the other men. The lasses also looked at him askance, thinking they had never seen a lustier youth. First of all, he went to the booth where stout ale was sold, and standing aloft on a bench, he called to all that were near to come and drink with him. "Hey, sweet lads," cried he, "who will drink ale with a stout yeoman? Come all, Let us be merry, for the day is sweet, and the ale is tingling. Come hither, good yeoman, and thou, for not a farthing shall one of you pay. Nay, turn hither, thou lusty beggar, and thou jolly tinker, for all shall be merry with me. Thus he shouted, and all crowded round, laughing with the brown ale, while the brown ale flowed. And they called Little John a brave fellow, each swearing that he loved him as his own brother. For when one has entertainment with nothing to pay, one loves the man that gives it to them. The next place Little John went was to the dancing booth, where 3 men made sweet music with bagpipes. Here he laid aside his bow and his quiver and joined in the sport, dancing so long that none could stand against him. A score of lasses came, one after another, and strove to dance him down, but could not do so. For Little John leaped so high, snapping his fingers the while, and shouting so loud that every lass vowed that she had never seen so sweet a lad in all her life before. Then, after he had danced a long time, he strolled to the platform where they were at cudgel play, for he loved about at quarterstaff as he loved meat and drink, and here befell an adventure that was sung in ballads throughout the mid-country for many a day. One fellow there was that cracked crowns of everyone who threw... One fellow there was that cracked crowns of everyone who threw cap into the ring. This was Eric Lincoln, of great renown, whose name had been sung in ballads throughout the countryside. When Little John reached the stand, he found none fighting, but only bold Eric walking up and down the platform, swinging his staff and shouting lustily. Now, who will come and strike a stroke for the lass he loves the best, with a good Lincolnshire yeoman? How now, lads, step up, or else the lass's eyes are not bright hereabouts, or the blood of Nottingham youth is sluggish and cold. Lincoln against Nottingham, say I, for no one hath put foot upon the boards this day, such as we of Lincoln call a cudgel player. At this one would nudge another with his elbow, saying, Get thou, Ned, or go thou, Thomas. But no lad cared to gain a cracked crown for nothing. Presently Eric saw where Little John stood amongst the others, a head and shoulder above them all, and he called to him loudly, Hallo, thou long-legged fellow in scarlet, broad are thy shoulders and thick thy head. Was not thy lass fair enough for thee to take cudgel in hand for her sake? In truth, I believe that Nottingham men do turn to bone and sinew, for neither heart nor courage they have. Now, thou good lout, will that not twirl staff for Nottingham? Ay, quoth Little John, but had I but my own good staff here, it would please me hugely to crack thy knave's pate, thou saucy braggart. I wot it would be well for thee, and thy coxcomb were cut. Thus he spoke, slowly at first, for he was slow to move, but his wrath gathered headway like a great stone rolling down a hill, so that he at the end was full of anger. Then Eric Lincoln laughed aloud. Well spoken for one who fears to meet me fairly, man to man, said he. Saucy art thou thy own self, and if thou puttest foot upon these boards, I will make thy saucy tongue rattle within thy teeth. Now, quoth Little John, is there never a man here that all will lend me a good stout staff till I try the mettle of yon fellow? At this, half a score reached him their staves, and he took the stoutest and heaviest of them all. Then, looking up and down the cudgel, he said, Now I have mine hand but a splint of wood, a barley straw, as it were, yet I trow it will have to serve me, so here goeth. Thereupon he cast the cudgel upon the stand, and, leaping lightly after it, snatched it up in his hand again. Then each man stood in his place and measured the others with fell looks until he that directeth the sport cried, Play! and at this they stepped forth, each grasping his staff tightly in the middle. Then those that stood around saw that the stoutest game of quarterstaff that e'er Nottingham town beheld. At first, Eric o' Lincoln thought that he would gain an easy advantage, so he came forth as if he would say, "Watch, good people, how that I carve you this cockerel right speedily." But he presently found it to be no such speedy matter. Right deftly he struck, and with great skill of fence, but he had found his match in Little John. Once, twice, thrice he struck, and 3 times Little John turned the blows to the right hand, and to the left hand, and to the right. Then quickly, and with a dainty backhanded blow, he rapped Eric beneath his guard so shrewdly that it made his head ring again. Then Eric stepped back to gather his wits, while a great shout went up, and all were glad that Nottingham had cracked Lincoln's crown, and thus ended the first bout of the game. Then presently the director of the sport cried, "Play!" and they came together again. But now Eric played warily, for he found his man was of right good mettle, and also he had no sweet memory of the blow that he had got. So his bout neither Little John nor the Lincoln man caught a stroke within his guard. Then, after a while, they parted again, and this made the second bout. Then for the 3rd time they came together, and at first Eric strove to be wary, as he had been before, but growing mad at finding himself so foiled, he lost his wits and began to rain blows so fiercely and so fast that they rattled like hail on penthouse roof. But in spite of it all, he did not reach within Little John's guard. Then at last Little John saw his chance and seized it right cleverly. Once more, with a quick blow, he rapped Eric beside the head, and ere he could regain himself, Little John slipped his right hand down to his left hand, and with a swinging blow smote the other so sorely upon the crown that down he fell as though he would never move again. Then the people shouted so loud that folk came running from all about to see what was the ado, while Little John leaped down from the stand and gave the staff back to him that had lent it to him. And thus ended the famous bout between Little John and Eric o' Lincoln, of great renown. But now the time had come when those who were to shoot with the longbow were to take their places, so that people began flocking to the butts where the shooting was to be. Near the target, in a good place, sat the sheriff upon a raised dais with his many gentlefolk around him. When the archers had taken their places, the heralds came forward and proclaimed the rules of the game, and how each should shoot 3 shots, and to him that should shoot the best, the prize of 2 fat steers was to belong. A score of brave shots were gathered there, and among them some of the keenest hands at the longbow in Lincoln and Nottingham, and among them Little John stood taller than all the rest. "Who is yon stranger clad all in scarlet?" said some, and others answered, "It is he that hath but now so soundly cracked the crown of Eric o' Lincoln." Thus the people talked among themselves, until at last it reached even the sheriff's ears. And now each man stepped forward and shot in turn, but though each shot well, Little John was the best of all, for 3 times he struck the clout, and once only the length of a barleycorn from the centre. "Hey for all the tall archer!" shouted the crowd, and some among them shouted, "Hey for Reynold Greenleaf!" for this was the name that Little John had called himself that day. Then the sheriff stepped down from the raised seat and came to where the archers stood, while all doffed their caps that saw him coming. He looked keenly at Little John, but did not know him, though he said after a while, "How now, good fellow, methinks there is that about thy face that I have seen elsewhere, erewhile." "Mayhap it may be so," quoth Little John, "for often have I seen your worship." And as he spoke, he looked steadily into the sheriff's eyes, so that the latter did not suspect who he was. "A brave blade thou art, good fellow," said the sheriff, "and I hear that thou hast well upheld the skill of Nottinghamshire against that Lincoln this day. What may be thy name, good fellow?" "Men do call me Ranald Greenleaf, your worship," said Little John, and the old ballad that tells of this adds, "So in truth was he a green leaf, but of what manner of tree the sheriff wot not." "Now, Ranald Greenleaf," quoth the sheriff, "thou art the fairest hand at the longbow that mine eyes ever beheld, next to that false knave Robin Hood, from whose wiles heaven forfend me. Wilt thou join my service, good fellow? Thou shalt be paid right well for 3 suits of clothes shalt thou have a year, with good food and as much ale as thou canst drink. And besides this, I will pay thee wort of 40 marks each Michaelmas day." "Then here stand I, a free man, and right gladly will I enter thy household," said Little John, for he thought he might find some merry jest should he enter the sheriff's service. "Hey, Bright, I'm so sorry if there was a big delay. I was totally sucked in the story. I'm almost at the end of the chapter." "Fairly hast thou won the fat steers," said the sheriff, "and hereunto I will add a butt of good March beer, for joy of having gotten such a man, for I wot thou shootest as fair a shaft as Robin Hood himself." "Then," said Little John, "for joy of having gotten myself into thy service, I will give fat steers and brown ale to all these good folk, to make them merry withal." At this arose a great shout, many casting their caps aloft for joy of the gift. Then some built their great fires and roasted the steers, and others broached the butt of ale, with which all made themselves merry. Then when they had eaten and drunk as much as they could, and when the day faded and the great moon arose, all red and round, over the spires and the towers of Nottingham town, they joined hands and danced around the fires to the music of bagpipes and harps. But long before this merrymaking had begun, the sheriff and his new servant, Ranald Greenleaf, were in the castle of Nottingham. Going to take a little break between chapters. I hope you're having a good morning, Bright. How has your week been going so far? I know it's kind of still early in the week. Yeah. That's good. I'm glad to hear it. It's nice to have stuff to have on in the background when you're working. Oh, okay. Nice. That must be weird. Have you been working from home for like almost a whole year? It must have been really strange. The company that I talked about from time to time, Rooster Teeth. Oh, thank you so much for the resub. Oh, so this. Wow, 5 months. Goodness. Yeah, it's almost been an entire year. So that must have been very strange. But yeah, Rooster Teeth, who I mentioned before, they haven't, yeah, it's been almost a year that they've been in the office. They're in Austin, Texas, and even though a lot of the other places in Texas aren't taking it seriously, they're like, no, we know this is a thing. So they had one video where one of them went back to the office just to, walk around and be like, so remember this place? And then he went and checked the fridge where there was still food in it. And oh my word, they should have sent the guy that has no sense of smell, because, wow. Yeah, I can imagine that would be so strange. It's kind of strange. Sister is finding it a bit strange to be working from home, because, on Friday, not only was it her birthday, but it also marked the 1-month anniversary of leaving that awful job, so... She's been in contact with one of her one of her old coworkers, and he said that another one of her coworkers, who is one of, the only other good ones, he also left, and he has a new job in a place that has been seeking him out. So we're happy for him. Is it nice to be back home, or was it nice to be back in the office? That's nice. Yeah, it's good to get a little different surroundings. Oh, okay. Spending more time in the office or more time at home? Okay. That should be interesting. Actually, sounds like it could be kind of nice. I know some of the schools around here give their students the option of either going on campus for school or doing it remotely from home. But I don't think they have the option of split. I thought that it was going to be split, that they were going to have half of the campus go the first 2 days, do a thorough scrub down, and then have the other half of the campus there for the next 2 days. But that didn't turn out to be the case. Who knows? I think they're still trying to figure out what they're going to be doing. It's hard to think that it's almost been a year. Almost exactly. That is interesting. A 3D printed steak. I know that they tried to grow a steak, and I think that it was edible, but it was way too expensive to make. I wonder what they used to 3D print it. The things you can make with 3D printers. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm trying to think of what this reminds me of. Like a movie that I've seen or something. It also kind of reminds me of It, the big villain in what was it? A Wrinkle in Time, for some reason. Well, shall we get back to the story? I think we can do one more chapter, and I think this ends this second part. Oh, there's more songs. I wish I knew the music of the songs, and then I could sing them. But I do not. Totally does, yes. Yeah, the food replicators kind of frustrate me because it's like, that defeats the purpose of the food. But, that's me. Okay. I was trying to remember what denomination the pork treats was, and it's 100. Alrighty. Shall we get back to it? And then we can maybe chat a little bit after this last chapter. So, Heidi Maestro. Chapter 3. How Little John lived at the sheriff's house. Thus Little John entered into the sheriff's service and found the life he led there easy enough, for the sheriff made him his right-hand man and held him in great favor. He sat nigh the sheriff at meat, and he ran beside his horse when he went a hunting, so that, what with hunting and hawking a little, and eating rich dishes and drinking good sack, and sleeping until late hours of the morning, he grew as fat as a stall-fed ox. Those things floated easily along with the tide until one day, when the sheriff went a hunting, there happened that which broke the smooth surface of things. This morning the sheriff and many of his men set forth to meet certain lords to go hunting. He looked all about him for his good man, Reynold Greenleaf, but not finding him, was vexed, for he wished to show Little John's skills to his noble friend. As for Little John, he lay abed, snoring lustily till the sun was high in the heavens. At last he opened his eyes and looked about him, but did not move to arise. Brightly shone the sun in at the window, and all the air was sweet with the scent of woodbine that hung in sprays about the wall without, for the cold winter was past and spring was come again, and Little John lay still, thinking how sweet was everything on this fair morn. Just then he heard faint and far away a distant bugle note sounding, thin and clear. The sound was small, but like a little pebble dropped in a glossy fountain, it broke all the smooth surface of his thoughts until his whole soul was filled with disturbance. His spirit seemed to awaken from his sluggishness, and his memory brought back to him all the merry greenwood life. All the birds were singing blithely there this bright morning, and how his loved companions and friends were feasting and making merry, or perhaps talking of him with sober speech. For when he first entered the sheriff's service, he didn't so in jest. But the hearthstone was warm during the winter, and the fare was full, and so he had abided, putting off from day to day his going back to the Sherwood, until 6 long months had passed. But now he thought of his good master, and of Will Stutely, whom he loved better than anyone in all the world, and of young David of Doncaster, whom he had trained so well in all manly sports, till they came over his heart a great and bitter longing for them all, so that his eyes filled with tears. Then he said aloud, "Here I grow fat like a stall-fed ox, and all my manliness departed from me, while I become a sluggard and dolt. But I will arouse me and go back to mine own dear friends once more, and never will I leave them again, till life doth leave my lips." So saying, he leaped from bed, for he had hated his sluggishness more. While he came downstairs, he saw the steward standing near the pantry door, a great fat man with a huge bundle of keys hanging to his girdle. Then Little John said, "Oh, Master Steward, hungry man am I, for naught have I had for all this blessed morn. Therefore, give me to eat." When the steward looked grimly at him and rattled the keys in his girdle, for he hated Little John because he had found favor with the sheriff. "So, Master Reynold Greenleaf, thou art an hungered, art thou?" quoth he. "But, fair youth, if thou livest long enough, thou wilt find that he who getteth over much sleep for an idle head goeth with an empty stomach. For thou saith the old saw, for what saith the old saw, Master Greenleaf? Is it not the late fowl findeth but ill faring?" "Now, thou great purse of fat," cried Little John, "I ask thee not for fool's wisdom, but for bread and meat. Who art thou that thou shouldst deny me to eat? But St. Dunstan, thou hadst best tell me where my breakfast is, if thou wouldst save broken bones." "Thy breakfast, Master Fireblaze, is in the pantry," answered the steward. "Then fetch it hither," cried Little John, who waxed angry by this time. Go thou and fetch it thine own self," quoth the steward. "Am I thy slave to fetch and carry for thee? I say, go thou, bring it to me. I say, go thou, fetch it for thyself." "Ay, marry, that I will, right quickly," quoth Little John in a rage, and so saying he strode to the pantry and tried to open the door, but found it locked, Whereat the steward laughed and rattled his keys. Then the wrath of Little John boiled over, and lifting his clenched fist, he smote the pantry door, bursting out 3 panels, and making so large an opening that he would easily stoop and walk through it. While the steward saw what was done, he waxed mad with rage, and, as Little John stooped to look into the pantry, he seized him from behind by the nape of the neck, pinched him sorely, and smiting him over the head with his keys, till the yeoman's ears rang again. That's quite a picture. At this, Little John turned upon the steward and smote him such a buffet that the fat man fell to the floor, and lay there as though he would never move again. "There," quoth Little John, "think well of that stroke, and never keep a good breakfast from a hungry man again." So saying, he crept into the pantry and looked about him to see if he could find something to appease his hunger. He saw a great venison pasty and 2 roasted capons, besides which was a platter of plover's eggs. Moreover, there was a flask of sack and one of canary, a sweet sight to a hungry man. These he took down from the shelves and placed upon a sideboard, and prepared to make himself merry. Now the cook in the kitchen across the courtyard heard the loud talking between Little John and the steward, and also the blow that Little John struck the other, so he came running across the court and up the stairway to where the steward's pantry was, bearing in his hands the spit with the roast still upon it. Meanwhile, the steward had gathered his wits about him and risen to his feet, so that when the cook came to the steward's pantry, he saw him glowering through the broken door at Little John, who was making ready for a good repast, as one dog glowers at another that has a bone. When the steward saw the cook, he came to him, and putting one arm over his shoulder, "Alas, sweet friend," quoth he, for the cook was tall, stout man, "seest thou what that vile knave Reynold Greenleaf hath done? He hath broken in upon our master's goods, and hath smitten me a buffet round upon the ear, so that I thought I was so that I thought I was dead. Good cook, I love thee well, and thou shalt have a good pottle of our master's best wine every day, for thou art an old and faithful servant. Also, good cook, I have 10 shillings that I mean to give as a gift to thee. But hatest thou not to see a vile upstart like Reynold Greenleaf taking it upon him so bravely?" "Ay, marry, so that do I," quoth the cook boldly, for he liked the steward because of his talk of the wine and of the 10 shillings. "Get thee gone straight away to thy room, and I will bring out this knave by his ears." So saying, he laid aside his spit and drew the sword that hung by his side. A cook with a sword, interesting. Whereupon the steward left as quickly as he could, for he hated the sight of naked steel. Then the cook walked straight away to the broken pantry door, through which he saw Little John tucking a napkin beneath his chin, preparing to make himself merry. "Why, how now, Reynold Greenleaf?" said the cook. "Thou art no better than a thief, I wot. Come thou straight forth, man, or I will carve thee as I would carve a sucking pig." "Nay, good cook, bear thou thyself more seemingly, or else I will come forth to thy dole. At most times I am as a yearling lamb, but when one cometh between me and my meal, I am a raging lion, as it were." "Lion or no lion," quoth the valorous cook, "come thou straight forth, else thou art a coward heart as well as a knavish thief." "Ha!" said and cried Little John, "coward's name have I never had. So look to thyself, good cook, for I come forth straight, the roaring lion I did speak of but now." Then he, too, drew his sword and came out of the pantry. Then, putting themselves into position, they came slowly together with grim and angry looks. But suddenly Little John lowered his point. "Hold, good cook," said he. "Now I bethink me it were ill of us to fight with good victuals, standing so nigh, and such a feast as thou befit 2 stout fellows such as we are. Marry, good friend, I think we should enjoy this fair feast ere we fight. What sayest thou, jolly cook?" At this speech the cook looked up and down, scratching his head in doubt, for he loved good feasting. At last he drew a long breath and said to Little John, "Well, good friend, I like thy plan right well. So, pretty boy, say I, let us feast with all my heart, for one of us may sup in paradise before nightfall." So each thrust his sword back into the scabbard and entered the pantry. Then, after they had settled themselves, Little John drew his dagger and thrust it into the pie. "A hungry man must be fed," quoth he. "So, sweet chuck, I help myself without leave." But the cook did not lag far behind, for straightway his hands also were deeply thrust within the good pasty. After this, neither of them spoke further, but used their teeth to better purpose. But though neither spoke, they looked at one another, each thinking within himself that he had never seen a more lusty fellow than the one across the board. A pasty, by the way, is basically it's kind of like a turnover, like meat and potatoes and other vegetables, like a hand pie, I guess you could say, and it's got a thick rind on one side. And miners, at least in my area, because being in California, there are a lot of mining places around here, and they would cook pasties and then have them for their lunch, so that they would hold on to the thick rind crust and then just throw the crust away so that they wouldn't get poisoned by any of the materials that were on their hands. And I love pasties. At last, after a long time had passed, the cook drew a full, deep breath, as though of much regret, and wiped his hands upon the napkin, for he could eat no more. Little John also had enough, for he pushed the pasty aside, as though he would say, "I want thee by me no more, good friend." Then he took the pottle of sack, and said he, "Now, good fellow, I swear by all that is bright, that thou art the stoutest companion at eating that ever I had. Lo, I drink thy health." So saying, he clapped the flask to his lip, and cast his eyes aloft, while the good wine flooded his throat. Then he passed the pottle to the cook, who also said, "Lo, I drink thy health, sweet fellow." Now, nor was he behind Little John in drinking any more than in eating. "Now," quoth Little John, "thy voice is right round and sweet, jolly lad. I doubt not thou canst sing a ballad more blithely, canst thou not?" "Truly I have trolled one now and then," quoth the cook, "yet I would not sing alone." "Nay, truly," said Little John, "that were but all courtesy. Strike up thy ditty, and I will afterwards sing one to match it, if I can." "So be it, pretty boy," quoth the cook. "And hast thou e'er heard the song of the deserted shepherdess?" "Truly I know not," answered Little John, "but sing thou, and let me hear." Then the cook took another draught from the pottle, and clearing his throat, sang right sweetly, the song of the deserted shepherdess. "In Lenten time, when leaves wax green, then pretty birds begin to mate. When lark doth sing, I thrush, I ween, and stock dove cooeth soon and late. Fair Phyllis sat beside a stone, and thus I heard her make her moan. O willow, 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 I'll take me of thy branches fair, and twine a wreath to deck my hair. The thrush hath taken him as she, the robin too, and eke the dove. My robin hath deserted me, and left me for another love. So here my brookside all alone, I sit me down and make my moan. O willow, 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 I'll take me of my branches fair, and thine a wreath to deck my hair. But ne'er came herring from the sea, but good as he were in the tide. Young Croydon came o'er the lea, and sat him Phyllis down beside. So presently she changed her tone, and 'gan to cease her from her moan. O willow, 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 thou mayst e'en keep thy garlands fair, I want them not to deck my hair. Now, by my faith, cried Little John, that same is a right good song, and hath truth in it also. Glad am I thou likest it, sweet lad, said the cook. Now sing thou one also, for ne'er should a man be merry alone, and sing and list not. Then I will sing thee a song of a right good knight of Arthur's court, and now how he cursed his heart's wound without running upon the dart again, as did thy Phyllis, for I wot she did not cure one smart by giving herself another. So list thou while I sing. The Good Knight and His Love. When Arthur King did rule this land, a goodly king was he, and had he of stout knights a band of merry company. Among them all, both great and small, a good stout knight was there, a lusty child, and eke a tall, that loved a lady fair. But naught would she to do with he, and turned her face away. So gat he gone to far country, and left that lady gay. There all alone he made his moan, and eke did sob and sigh, and weep till it would move a stone, and he was like to die. But still his heart did feel the smart, and eke the dire distress, and rather grew his pain more sharp, as grew his body less. Then gat he back where was good sack and merry company, and soon did cease to cry alack, when blithe and gay was he. From which I hold, and fell full bold to say and eke believe, that gin the belly go not cold, the heart will cease to grieve. Now, by my faith, cried the cook, as he rattled the pottle against the sideboard, I like that same song hugely, and eke the motive of it, which lieth like a sweet kernel in a hazelnut. Now thou art a man of shrewd opinions, quoth Little John, and I love thee truly as thou wert my brother. And I love thee too, but the day draweth on, and I have my cooking to do ere our master cometh home, so let us e'en go and settle this brave battle we have in hand. Ay, marry, said Little John, and that right speedily. Never have I more laggard in fighting than in eating and drinking. So come thou straight forth into the passageway, where there is good room to swing a sword, and I will try to serve thee. Then they both stepped forth into the broad passage that led to the steward's pantry, where each man drew his sword again, and without much ado fell upon the other as though he would hew his fellow limb from limb. Then their swords clashed upon one another with great din, and sparks flew from each blow in showers, so they fought up and down the hall for an hour and more, neither striking the other a blow, though they strove their best to do so, for both were skillful at the fence, so nothing came of all their labor. Ever and anon they rested, panting, then, after getting their wind, at it they would go again, more fiercely than ever. At last Little John cried aloud, Hold, good cook, whereupon each rested upon his sword, panting. Oh, now will I make my vow, quoth Little John. Thou art the very best swordsman that ever mine eyes beheld. Truly I had thought so carved thee ere now. And I had thought to do the same by thee, quoth the cook, but I have missed the mark somehow. I have been thinking within myself, quoth Little John, what were we fighting for? But albeit I do not rightly know. Oh, why, no more than I do, said the cook. I bear no love to that Percy steward, but I thought that we had engaged to fight with one another, and that it must be done. Now, quoth Little John, it doth seem to me that instead of striving to cut one another's throats, it were better for us to be boon companions, What sayst thou, jolly cook? Wilt thou go with me to Sherwood Forest and join with Robin Hood's band? Thou shalt live a merry life within the woods, and 70 good companions shalt thou have, one of whom is mine own self. Thou shalt have 3 suits of Lincoln green each year, and 40 marks to pay. Now thou art a man after my own heart, cried the cook right heartily. And as thou speakest of it, that is the very service for me. I will go with thee, and right gladly. Give me thy palm, sweet fellow, and I will be thine own companion from henceforth. What may be thy name, lad? Men do call me Little John, good fellow. How? Thou art indeed Little John, good Robin Hood's own right-hand man. Many a time I oft heard of thee, but never did I hope to set eyes upon thee. And thou art indeed the famous Little John. And the cook seemed lost in amazement, and looked upon his companion with open eyes. I am Little John indeed, and I will beg to Robin Hood this day a right stout fellow to join his merry band. But ere we go, good friend, it seemeth to me to be a vast pity that, as we have had so much of the sheriff's food, we should not also carry off some of his silver plate to Robin Hood as a present from his worship. Aye, merry is it, said the cook, and so they began hunting about, and took as much silver as they could lay hands upon, clapping it into a bag, and when they had filled the sack, they set forth to Sherwood Forest. Plunging into the wood, they came at last to the greenwood tree, where they found Robin Hood and 80 of his merry men lying upon the fresh green grass. When Robin and his men saw who it was that came, they leaped to their feet. Now welcome, cried Robin Hood. Now welcome, Little John, for long hath it been since we have heard from thee. Now we all knew that thou hadst joined the sheriff's service. And how hast thou fared all these long days? Oh, right merrily I have lived at the Lord Sheriff's, answered Little John, and I have come straight thence. See, good master, I have brought thee his cook, and even his silver plate. Thereupon he told Robin Hood and his merry men that were there all that had befallen him since he had left them to go to the fair at Nottingham town. Then all shouted with laughter, except Robin Hood, but he looked grave. Nay, Little John, said he, thou art a brave blade and a trusty fellow. I am glad thou hast brought thyself back to us, and with such a good companion as the cook, whom we all welcome to Sherwood. But I like not so well that thou hast stolen the sheriff's plate like some paltry thief. The sheriff hath been punished by us, and hath lost 300 pounds, even as he thought to despoil another. But he hath done naught that we should steal his household plate from him. Though Little John was vexed with this, he strove to pass it off with a jest. Nay, good master, quoth he, if thou thinkest the sheriff gave us not the plate, I will fetch him, that he may tell us with his own lips he giveth it all to us. So saying, he leaped to his feet, and was gone before Robin could call him back. Little John ran for full 5 miles till he came to where the sheriff of Nottingham and a gay company were hunting near the forest. When Little John came to the sheriff, he doffed his cap and bent his knee. God save thee, good master, quoth he. Why, Reynold Greenleaf, cried the sheriff, whence comest thou, and where hast thou been? I have been in the forest, answered Little John, speaking amazedly. And there I saw a sight such as ne'er before man's eyes beheld. Yonder I saw a young hart, all in green from top to toe, and about him was a herd of 80 deer, and they too were all of green from head to foot. Yet I dared not shoot, good master, for fear lest they should slay me. Why, how now, Reynold Greenleaf, cried the sheriff. Thou art dreaming, or thou art mad, that thou dost bring me such a tale. Nay, I am not dreaming, nor am I mad, cried Little John. And if thou wilt come with me, I will show thee right this fair night, for I have seen it with mine own eyes. But thou must come alone, good master, lest the others frighten them and they get away. So the party all rode forward, and Little John led them downward into the forest. good master," quoth he at last, "we are nigh where I saw this herd." Then the sheriff descended from his horse and bade him wait for him until he should return, and Little John led him forward through a close copse until suddenly they came to a great open glade, at the end of which Robin Hood sat beneath the shade of the great oak tree, with his merry men all about him. "See, good master sheriff," quoth Little John, "yonder is the hart of which I spoke to thee." At this the sheriff turned to Little John and said bitterly, "Long ago I thought I remembered thy face, but now I know thee. Woe betide thee, Little John, for thou hast betrayed me this day." Then Little John laughed aloud. "Good master sheriff," said he, "thou dost indeed know me, and I am Little John. But let me tell thee, all this would not have happened had not thy beggarly steward starved me, and had he given me food to eat when I asked it. But if he gave none to me, the green hart will give thee another feast. And when thou goest back, tell thy steward the time will come when he and I shall have a reckoning." In the meantime Robin Hood had come to them. "Now welcome, master sheriff," said he. "Hast thou come today to take another feast with me?" "Nay, heaven forbid," said the sheriff in tones of deep earnest. I care for no feast, and have no hunger today." "Nevertheless," quoth Robin, "if thou hast no hunger, maybe thou hast thirst, and well I know thou wilt take a cup of sack with me. But I am grieved that thou wilt not feast with me, for thou couldst have victuals to thy liking, for there stands thy cook." Then he led the sheriff willy-nilly to the seat he knew so well beneath the greenwood tree. "Ho, lads," cried Robin, "fill our good friend the sheriff a right brimming cup of sack, and fetch it hither, for he is faint and weary. Then one of the band brought the sheriff a cup of sack, bowing low as he handed it to him, but the sheriff could not touch the wine, for he saw it served in one of his own silver flagons, on one of his own silver plates. "How now," quoth Robin, "dost thou like our new silver service? We have gotten a bag of it this day." So saying, he held up the sack of silver that Little John and the cook had brought with him. Then the sheriff's heart was bitter within him, but, not daring to say anything, he only gazed upon the ground. Robin looked keenly at him for a time before he spoke again. Then said he, "Now, master sheriff, the last time thou camest to Sherwood Forest, thou didst come seeking to despoil poor spendthrift, and thou wert despoiled thine own self. But now thou comest seeking to do no harm, nor do I now, oh goodness, nor do I know that thou hast despoiled any man. I take thy tithes from fat priests and lordly squires to help those with that they despoil, and to raise up those that they bow down. But I know not that thou hast tenants of thine own whom thou hast wronged in any way. Therefore take thou thine own again, nor will I despoil thee today of so much as 1 farthing. Come with me, and I will lead thee from the forest back to thine own party again." Then, slinging the bag upon his shoulder, he turned away, the sheriff following him, all too perplexed in mind to speak. So they went forward until they came to within a furlong of the spot where the sheriff's companions were waiting for him. Then Robin Hood gave the sack of silver back to the sheriff. "Take thou thine own again," said he, "and hearken to me, good sheriff. Take thou a piece of advice with it. Try thy servants well ere thou dost engage them again so readily." Then turning, he left the other standing bewildered, with the sack in his hands. The company that waited for the sheriff were all amazed to see him come out of the forest bearing a heavy sack upon his shoulders, but though they questioned him, he answered never a word, acting like one who walks in a dream. Without a word he placed the bag across his nag's back, and then, mounting, rode away, all following him. But all the time there was a great turmoil of thoughts within his head, tumbling one over the other. And thus ends the merry tale of Little John, and how he entered the sheriff's service. That is actually amazing timing because we are at 2 hours. So I usually do a game stream after story time, but my voice is still a little bit raw. So gonna rest it a bit because we've got on Thursday the conclusion of The Heroic Slave by Frederick Douglass, which I just happened to be reading during Douglass Week, and I've been doing a little bit of reading up on the true story that it is based on. Is really interesting, and I'll tell you about it after story time on Thursday, or for Bright and UK, that will be Friday morning. So speaking of UK, I believe she's still streaming. I'm just going to double check really quickly. Let me find her here. Because I would like to read her. Yay, she is still streaming. Okay. So let's go ahead. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good night, Corral. Thank you for hanging out with me, you, and Bright. And I think I saw another person that was hanging out there. So let's go ahead and raid UK. Get 2 Ys. And let me get my raid message ready. All right. I hope you have a good day. Hope to see you on Thursday, or, just see you next time. Bye.
I tried to quit smoking cigarettes probably hundreds of times over the years. 2 or 3 days into quitting again, I go